Have you ever looked at someone's art and wondered how the hell they can get markers and pencils to look so clean and perfect? Why is theirs so satisfying and vibrant and flawless, and mine has streaks and gaps and textures I didn't mean to put in there? Fear not, that is what this video is for. I'm gonna help you get awesome results every time, and we're gonna go through from beginner to intermediate and advanced techniques to make your coloring the best it can be. This video is sponsored by Ohuhu, makers of my favorite alcohol markers, who have upgraded their amazing Honolulu line and sent me their brand new oil pencils. So I'll be using these throughout the video, and I'll share some details about them a little bit later. So let's start with the beginners, and in my experience, the hallmark of a beginner when it comes to coloring is streakiness and unintended textures. Let's start with alcohol markers. But if you don't know how they work and you just go in using them like any other water-based marker, the results might not be what you want. But if you're a beginner, fear not, there is a really easy way to get that same beautiful result without any experience. And it's called the cycling coloring technique. And the technique is what it says, making small cycling motions. It enables the color to deeply and fully saturate to its maximum very quickly while you're moving around the area that you're coloring. And as you can see, in a single pass, this is with no additional layers, no additional techniques, nothing but this cycling coloring method, you can get gorgeous results that look like they're from a children's storybook by a professional artist. Now, pencils is a little bit different. You don't saturate the paper in the same way that you do with markers, because you don't apply ink. You're basically rubbing pigment onto the paper. So there's usually two ways in which you end up with inconsistent or poorly textured pencil work on the paper. The first is the paper. It's not even you or your technique. See, paper comes with different finishes, and this blending card, which I usually use for markers, is incredibly smooth. It feels like silk to rub my fingers across. But paper is different for different mediums, and on the opposite end of the spectrum you have watercolor paper, which feels quite grainy as you rub your fingers along it. This is called the tooth of the paper because it's the texture that sort of sticks up and kind of bites onto the pigment as you use it. It's really useful in watercolor because all of those tiny ridges help the water spread quite evenly and everything apply in a way that stays where you put it down rather than pooling or spreading. And the paper is usually quite thick and it absorbs, and it works well with watercolors. With pencils, you get unsightly textures and a lot of bumps. Most of the paper people are used to using is somewhere between these two, which still has a little bit of a tooth but isn't silky smooth. Now this is a good paper to use, but if you're a beginner, it will still have that texture. And if you're not super experienced at sort of building up and blending the pencils, you might be blaming yourself. But if you use a smoother paper or work much slower and in layers, you will get a smoother result. Which brings me to the second reason that texture can be unintentionally inconsistent, and that is how you apply it. You see, unlike the alcohol markers, there really isn't a single layer application when it comes to good pencil usage. Even when you see those artworks where they create amazingly photorealistic pencil illustrations in portions that sort of spread out and look complete at every stage it spreads, even those are built up in tiny layers in each of those new little additions. The way to get that beautiful, final, perfectly textured end result with pencils is to build up on top of itself. So start with one layer of coverage, but don't go too heavy, and start again and just slightly vary the direction and repeat that until you have the depth and intensity that you want, and you will find that the finish will be very smooth if you work in about 3 or 4 layers of even pressure and in varied directions. So here's a little demo using the brush tip of the marker on my character and pencils on the magic spell behind him to create a bit of a softer difference between them, and without any blending between colors or any advanced techniques, just the simple beginner application of both the pencils and the markers, you can achieve incredible clean results with no experience or even skill really required. These are great techniques for beginners to get great results because you can mitigate your lack of experience and familiarity with the tool by working in a very specific, consistent way. Let's move on to a more intermediate stage. In my opinion, the thing that separates an intermediate traditional coloring artist from a beginner is the ability to mix new colors or create gradients between colors. And the word for both of these things is called blending. And it's the way that you can turn 36 colors into infinite colors. So let's start off with that, creating new colors from your limited palette of colors. To demonstrate, I'm going to lay down this big flat area of a mid blue and blend with a bunch of different colors to show how I can tweak that blue color with various tints and hues. Lightening the blue with a light blue, adding a yellow tint and greenifying it a little bit with a light yellow. Mixing it with an orange sort of makes for a khaki-ish orangey brown. A mauve makes it much more purple. A sand color creates a bit of a denim with a tint of green, and a dark gray and mid gray, and then of course the colorless blender allow me to push the value of that blue to dark and desaturated or to light. And using that method, I can invent colors that I don't have in my packs, creating a burgundy with a red and a cherry wood brown. Perhaps I want a mid pink, but I only have light pink and dark pink. Mix them together and I got a mid pink. You get the idea. And it's really useful if you have colors that you just want to lessen the intensity of, like this purple, which might be a bit strong for an application I might want, and I can just soften it with a light warm gray. Now you'll find if you add a dark gray, like I am here with this blue, you'll often lose a lot of that saturation. You can just go back to the blue and add it back in, and it sort of revitalizes that original color back into the mix that you've got. So that's what I'm talking about with the push and pull. You really can feel your way through it as you get to know how the markers work. Which means that with a simple collection of primary colors and a few bridging colors in between, you can really get the whole spectrum of the rainbow, and it is very satisfying. And whenever you want to create that gradient effect, just simply move back and forth between those colors, deepening the saturation where you want it to get stronger, or pull it back with the lighter or original color as you shape the gradients you're making. Now, believe it or not, pencils are pretty much the same. Obviously, applying them feels a bit different, but as you can see, using pretty much the same method over my blue example here, I can tint and shape my colors in an almost identical way, and I'm applying it exactly the way I showed you with the beginner tip. It's just a couple of layers of each, with more layers of the pencil that you want the intensity to be more affected by. I'm used to using wax-based pencils, which I personally find kind of hard to build up and a little resistant to their own material after a few layers. Working with Ohuhu's oil-based pencils feels fantastic. The colors are really vibrant and the blending and layering just feels seamless and almost creamy. And as I come to find out, they work incredibly with the markers, but we'll get to that later. So let's put all of this into practice, and we're going to come back to our wizard man again. And the intermediate techniques we're applying here are gradienting, meaning that we're going to start light, slowly build up our darkness, but with each area of shadow that we add, we go back to the previous lighter color and blend it back in, which allows us to make some really nice shading effects. The other thing I'm doing, of course, is inventing more subtle colors. I can use the colors that I have in my set to work towards the colors I want in my picture. The Honolulu markers were already my favorite markers. I was skeptical as to whether they could get any better. But I have to say, this new rubber nib that they've come up with really does feel silky to work with. The rate at which the ink dries and the accuracy I can use these markers at, it's subtle, but when you're used to working with these subtleties, it's noticeable enough to really appreciate it. Now, before we get to the advanced stuff, my favorite stuff, I want to talk a little bit more about these pencils and markers specifically because they're new from Ohuhu, and as you've seen, get really nice results. Starting off with Ohuhu's Halawa colored pencils. These are oil-based colored pencils as opposed to wax-based pencils. The soft oil-based core means you can deliver consistent, rich pigmentation with less effort in your application. And this is something I don't hear people really talking about a lot with pencils, but the basswood core, and I guess however they've formulated these oil sticks inside, they feel really durable. Then we get to these. They have now just upgraded the Honolulu to have a rubber-based tip that will feel extremely familiar to Copic users and will set you up for the long term. They're going to be durable, more flexible, and part of an expansive refillable color range. You can get this new set in a 24 or 36 pack, and in my experience using them so far, I have found the colors that they've come with feel like a fantastic fantastic balance. I've made some really cool artworks with a huge variety of blends, and I really haven't felt inhibited. It's a fantastic starter set. And you can get these amazing art supplies with an incredible 10% off using the code JAZZA'S10. All the details are in the description. Don't miss out. This is like the best coloring experience I've ever had. It's time to get advanced. Starting off with markers, and my favorite thing about alcohol markers is their ability to what I call push and pull. They have this fantastic ability to be able to push and pull tone in any direction based on the other markers you have. And to a degree, you can even fix mistakes using this method. I want to talk about tinting, which is a step I often save till last, but also always keep in mind in my pieces because it gives the most punch. And if you set your coloring up from the beginning to sort of account for this coming step, you can unlock some fantastic results. Now, this is a technique I've used often, and I'll show some examples of here where I've kept the outer edges sort of cleaner or clearer, even gradienting to white all the way through my coloring in. And it looks pretty good and finished in that state, but it's this final step of highlighting and tinting where I go in with an extra light color, usually a really light blue or yellow, and just by adding that wash and blending back into the lighter parts of that gradient, you can create incredible lighting effects. And the great thing about this, and with doing this with alcohol markers, is the way that a single color, such as a blue or a yellow, permeated on top of all of the gradients and colors you've mixed all over your piece so far, can unify and harmonize without losing the work you've done. For example, if you're looking at a piece or a room with a lot of color and turn on a red light, all of those colors take on the properties of that light. And this is why it's a bit of an advanced technique, because most beginning and intermediate artists think of the color as the color. A blue shirt is a blue shirt. Pink or brown skin is pink or brown skin. But when you introduce environmental effects, like let's say a brown furry creature in a watery environment with a bright blue sky, and the tendency for water to reflect blue will bounce up at that figure in the water, and that fur will take on some of the visual effect of the blue pigmentation. Even though obviously it doesn't change its color, when you think about your coloring in a more advanced way, you think about how light and color bounces off and affects and intermingles with each other. Now, there is not a one-size-fits-all way to apply these techniques. It's something that you learn over time. But I actually find alcohol markers are a little bit of a cheat code because you can see the effects of one color on another by applying a wash or a tint. You sort of learn by doing over time. Now, when it comes to pencils, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I don't consider myself all that expert at pencil illustration. There are people who are much better at creating entire colored illustrations with pencils than I am. However, I can say my favorite way to create really stunning marker art is with pencils. You can achieve subtlety and really impressive stuff with markers, but especially when it comes to the nuances and really subtle effects, this is where the pencils come in, because they can layer on top of your alcohol marker art and create really great effects. The other thing that using them together lets you do is create a little bit of sharpness, because especially when you've used alcohol markers heavily throughout a piece, you can start to lose the ability to hold on to detail. By sort of treating it as a separate step, a layer on top of a finished artwork, but a step of finishing the artwork with highlights and shadows. The last thing I want to add when it comes to advanced techniques pulls a little bit away from markers and pencils. Advanced artists usually duck out to other mediums, doing highlights with highlight gel pens or using paint markers on top of your more translucent layered artworks. So we've done our wizard for beginning and intermediate. Let's see what the advanced wizard looks like. Now you'll notice by this point, this is about the halfway point, it looks very much the same as the intermediate one, except with perhaps more empty highlight areas. That is intentional because I've left those ready to fill in and add texture and intensity, specifically from the direction of this intense pink glow that I have behind my wizard. I've made the glow look even more bright and intense by leaving the insides white and gradienting out from pink around the outside. And now I get to show you how amazing these materials are to work with to really add that final pop. Washes of pink over some of those areas left to be highlighted from the spell behind, smoothing out that gradient between the harsher pink and soft pink of the spell with pencils, and deepening the shadows and intensity by adding hue variation, subtly blending in purples and reds all around my wizard to tie it all together and to give it a real strength of intensity. Working with oil-based pencils isn't something I'm super familiar with, and now it's something I'm in love with, and Ohuhu have nailed it. Not only in their color range and the variety and everything that comes in this 72 set, but the way that they work with the alcohol markers to make, as you can see, really impressive pieces. I am so happy with the results and also really, really happy with the materials. And the last, most advanced technique there is, practice. Sorry, I know that's the lamest, most boring thing to say. I hate it. I hate it too. But at the end of the day, everything is a muscle, right? So even if you're using some of these more advanced techniques and you're not quite getting the results that you see in other people, that's just time. Just keep doing it. As long as you're having fun with it along the way, you will learn, you will improve, and your results will continue to get better. But you can only get better by doing. And I hope that this video has shown you from the very early stages how you can start without feeling frustrated with your own limitations. One of the ways you can do that, of course, is literally with these packs, which you've seen me use exclusively in this video. So you can trust the results look fantastic, and you can follow this guide using these materials and get very similar results. I have to give a massive shout out to Ohuhu. Not only obviously they've sponsored this video, and that is a huge support to this channel, but I mean, honestly, it's such a cool thing to see a company who started off making a great sort of underdog product and has fast become one of my favorite companies when it comes to art as a whole. Expanding from water-based markers and alcohol markers into paint markers, like I've showed in another video, and pencils, and how all of these things work beautifully together. Massive shout out, awesome stuff there. Go check them out. I'll put the link in the description. You will love their products. I love their products. I've genuinely had a blast getting to know their new color pencil range, and this will be my go-to when it comes to color pencils moving forward. That is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned a thing or two and had a bit of fun and that feeling of dopamine and satisfaction as you've watched. Hit the like button. Please leave a comment and let the algorithm know and me know that you've enjoyed this video, and of course subscribe for more fun with art and creativity. That is it for now. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.